Calling all leaders. Whether you're new to management or a seasoned pro, there's one thing we all strive for: building a team culture that truly thrives. Cultivating a rainforest team culture is your opportunity to master leadership with a fresh perspective. Based on Jason Kay's best-selling book, this immersive training offers you actionable strategies to inspire, engage, and empower your team. Leave with a notebook full of insights and plan to transform your office into a thriving, resilient rainforest. This is your moment. Register now at www.jasonkay.com. That's www.jasonkae.com.
Welcome to Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. My name is Chris Caramanica. As a 15-plus year veteran in the apartment industry, I have stories to tell, a desire to hear and tell others' stories. As a multiple committee member for NAA, a CAMT advisory board member and a CAMT holder, and a national presenter and educator, I have met and worked with so many great people in our industry at all different levels. This is not going to be a how-to podcast. This is going to be a how-did podcast. We are going to explore the how-did tales in multifamily maintenance. How did we do it? How did we learn from it? How did we grow? How did we decide not to do it again? Join me as we go beyond the work.
BTW, what is work-life balance? Thank you for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance, powered by the Multifamily Media Network. Today, my guest is Paul Rhodes. He's going to be pretty much a frequent guest on my show, and we wanted to have a quick conversation. We were recently together at a industry event, and we had a little back and forth about what is work-life balance. So, Paul, with zero introduction, what is work-life balance to you? This phrase that we see all the time on LinkedIn that we're always talking about at meetings, whether it's at our companies or at industry events.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to talk to you again, as always. And I continue to say it never happens enough or for long enough, which is the best part.
Well, hold on. Before you go any further, maybe we'll be fixing that for our listeners and our viewers in the very near future.
Is that a tease?
It's a tease.
No, say it isn't so.
It's a tease, but no, please continue on what your thought.
So we got to talking about, in between that time we had the conversation and now, I started thinking, and I'm going, what does our technological overlords say about work-life balance? So I went on the keyboard of magic and I went to Lord Google and I said, define work-life balance. And the algorithm keyed in on that word balance, and it came back with like 9 different definitions. And it was fascinating to me that the word repeated in those definitions was equilibrium. Whether you're talking about art, if all the components of a piece of art have the same emphasis, that is classified as balance. You can term wine as being a balanced beverage because all of the principles of the wine are in equilibrium or equal emphasis. And then it got to one that said balance is the quantity of money you have in the bank. And I stopped for a minute and I said, wait a second, hold on. That doesn't equal equilibrium, because there you're talking about a quantity. And the more I thought about all of those concepts and a couple others too, that word balance and really the whole statement is very loaded, especially when thinking about it in terms of being a maintenance professional. Last month, I did an episode on call. I did a podcast talking about being on call and how that sets the maintenance technician and maintenance professional aside from our office workers on site at a property. So all of that combined together says there is not one answer. I honestly believe that you cannot use the definition of work-life balance that says if I work 8 hours on site, that means I now have to be home for 8 hours. Well, no, that doesn't work. it's not real.
Yeah, I am a big subscriber I don't believe in work-life balance. I think at the end of the day, I think the balance, to your point, balance is the misnomer, is the wrong word in that phrase, right? Let's look at the number. Let's look at numbers. I'm a numbers guy. There are, in a 7-day week, okay, there's 168 hours, right? That is fixed. Time is fixed. If you are working a 40-hour week, you're now down to 112 hours of your week. That is your life. Now, I know people commute. I know people, work 50 or 60 hours a week, and we're going to get into that, from my perspective in a minute. But let's just look at a 40-hour work week. So now we're down to 112 hours a week. 8 hours in total week. You subtract that 40. Now what are you at? You're at 128 hours. That's yours. Let's just say the average American sleeps 8 hours a day, right? So that's what, 56 hours?
Yep.
All right. So I like numbers. So let's say that 168 minus the 40 minus the 56. You now have 72 waking hours. That is your life. And 40 hours. That is your work. That math kind of track?
It does, with the exception that if we're talking about work-life balance, then you have to remove from that total quantity the weekend, because we're not working on the weekend.
Well, that's also true. So that the weekend is those hours that you have on the weekend are actually captured in that 72 hours of life, in my example, right?
Yeah.
So let's go even further. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's go even further. So now we have 72.
Wait. You're talking more numbers than 20. I need to take my shoes off real quick because I've run out of fingers.
Please do so. So now we're looking at, 24 hours a day, 48 hours on a Saturday and Sunday. Let's back out the 16 hours that you are awake on a Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
That would be considered your, life on a Saturday and Sunday if you're not on call. So that leaves you, now we're looking at 40 hours a week of life, Monday to Friday, which is exactly in balance with a 40-hour work week.
Correct.
That hits your equilibrium. For anybody that wants to do the math and correct my math, please feel free. You can send an email to beyondtheworktales@gmail.com or leave a comment on my podcast host page. So, Paul, to your point, for a 40-hour work week, we've now determined there are 40 waking hours, Monday to Friday, that would be considered your life. So there actually is. What I have found is people who are complaining about a work-life balance are not balancing those 40 hours appropriately. And I firmly believe, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, is that work-life balance isn't an employer's fault or problem. It's the employees. Because if I choose to work past, my 40 hours, say I have a project that's due and I am going to cut into my 40 hours of personal life to complete that project, that is a choice because I'm now working outside of my contracted 40 hours a week. How do you feel about that? That's just my personal, and I will be the first to say, I work way more than 40 hours a week, right? But I also feel like I have a good, and I don't want to use the word balance anymore. I think I have a good handle on what is work, when is work, why is work, versus the same for my personal life.
I tend to view work-life balance from the frame of responsibility. And that very specific word is loaded. And I admit it's loaded. But I got this thing on my head, and let's see if we can work it out. I saw an interview recently with two people, and one of the people that was being interviewed, the interviewer asked the guy who was being interviewed, said, "You have a boring life, don't you?" And he says, "Yes." And the interviewer said, "You said that very adamantly. Do you not like having a boring life?" Or there. And the subject of the interview, he said something very profound. He says, "I intentionally have a boring life because of the decisions I've made." And he went on to talk about the fact he's married. He's got a number of kids. He's got a house that he is paying for. He's living below his means. He has an old car. He's close to his family. He has a job that he enjoys, but could drop at the drop of a hat. He has flexible hours and a flexible life. And he talks about it in terms that from the outside, it's very dull. There's minimal excitement. He has his days planned out, and yet this is a very public figure and someone that on all the socials and all of the interviews and press that he does is very energetic. And yet he's sitting in an interview and going, it's a boring life. My wife and I went to our 10-year high school reunion several years ago, and we had not seen the people that we graduated high school with in the intervening 10 years, just because life choices and that. And yes, my wife and I knew each other in high school. We actually met in 7th grade, but we didn't start dating until after we graduated. So yeah, I know, insert the John Hughes movie or something. But 10 years after we graduated, we went to the high school reunion. So we saw people that we graduated high school with. And everyone that I knew, and a lot of the people that the stories that my wife related, were leading energetic and adventurous lives. And this one had had 4 careers, and this one had been to jail. This one's got 4 or 5 divorces. This one's got 6 kids by 4 different people. You know, all of those types of stories. And everybody's kind of doing the life measurement of success thing. And it was very instructive because on the way home, we're driving back home, and we had gotten in the car, and neither one of us really felt like listening to music because we just come from a loud thing. So the radio was turned off, and we get 10, 12 miles down the road, and we're driving on the highway, and I look over at my wife, and she looks at me, and we both kind of say, unprompted in the same moment, we're boring. And we agreed. We have no problem with that. And it really is summed up by that statement. And I know this is a long answer to your simple question, but it's summed up in that statement of we have made decisions that lead to a boring life. And in that same frame, work-life balance is a summary of the decisions that you make. As a maintenance technician on site, I work 40 hours. Stereotypically, the maintenance technician is an hourly position. You begin at a certain time, and at the end of the day, you're expected at a certain time. Granted, different states have different rules and laws that get into play there. But at the end of the day, you, me, the worker, have accepted the responsibility to perform tasks as mandated by my company for those 40 hours. This is where being a maintenance technician comes into play, because there's a caveat to that says you also live on the other end of this thing on certain times where not only would you be expected to answer, but you will be, in certain situations, expected to leave those 40 hours of balance and go back to the property. See, that's where that making choices to, in my case, be boring comes into play. At our communities, at our properties, if we want our maintenance teams to have work-life balance per se, then are we, management companies, empowering our on-site technicians to make the decisions to decrease the amount of opportunities for this thing to go off?
Well, let's put aside on call for a minute. You know, you and I can talk about that for another 6 episodes back to back to back, right? And maybe we will in the future. But, you know, I look at it from putting on call aside, I look at maintenance professionals' life, especially our on-site teams, you know, because maintenance professionals is all encompassing. I use it as all encompassing from my porter through our senior vice president of facilities, directors, regional managers, the whole gamut. But looking at our on-site professionals, what I have found, and this has been throughout my career, not one specific company, not one specific site. Bobby and Jane will work on, they love overtime. They'll work on the weekend. And I will tell you that, yes, everybody loves to make a little bit more money, but they're making a choice to cut out their personal time to work. And in some cases, it's not, hey, Bobby and Jane, would you guys mind working this weekend? It is, you have to work this weekend, which is where a lot of professionals complain. I see it, whether that's on Facebook groups we're in, on LinkedIn, or directly to me as their director.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a balance because on-call, you sign up for on-call, right? That's part of your job description as a maintenance professional, right? And yes, I know job descriptions, other duty, my favorite line in every job description ever written for any company ever, not just our industry. Other duties as assigned by the management. And, working overtime, completing that vacant unit late on a Friday night because the resident's moving in the next day. So, I think that is for, our operations leaders who are on the call, that's something that you have to be mindful of, right? That this is happening. This happens every single day to thousands of maintenance. It is, the day we're recording this is a Wednesday, just before a holiday. And I guarantee you there are maintenance professionals who are going to be working until 9 o'clock tonight because there's a move-in on Saturday. I guarantee it. Thousands of them.
Oh, yes.
And it is not their choice. It is, you will do this. This has to get done.
I actually will push back a little bit on it's not their choice. And this, again,
please,
longer answer, but the pushback is this. You started that out by saying duties as assigned. One, the first question there, is that a problem with our leadership structure because we're setting up our maintenance technicians to wait for something to be assigned? In other words, are we taking away their feeling that they have a choice? They can initiate, they can do. How many times have you been at a property? I know I have. You go to a property and a maintenance technician finishes a work order, and instead of going to find another work order or go do the thing that's obviously needing to be done in front of them, they go wait for somebody else to tell them what to do next.
He's waiting for other duties assigned.
Right. They're waiting for the assigned part. So that's the first piece. But that leads into the choice of, in your example, we're doing this Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So it's the day before Thanksgiving. If there's a move-in on Saturday, the choice is, Mr. Maintenance Professional, when did you find out about the move out? In other words, the way our industry works, we require a resident to tell us 2-3 months before they're moving out. So in other words, why is this a last minute operation? And that, I think, just that fact, I think goes into, for our on-site workers, if you want work-life balance, you make choices to make whatever your version of balance to be. Do you want to be off at 5 o'clock? Great. You can be off at 5 o'clock. Plan it and make it happen. That might mean a potentially uncomfortable conversation with your property manager that says, hey, property manager, I've got these 12 things that are identified as needing to be done next week. So this is before. I got these 12 things, and I predict these 12 things will take 120 hours to do, but we only have 2 maintenance technicians. That's 80 hours. So, Mr. Property Manager, Mr. Assigning Other Duties, or Miss, which of these 12 items should we remove from our things to do list to ensure that we only work 8 hours? That way, one maintenance professional goes to my property manager and I am proving to them I have identified what our liabilities are. This is it. And you, being an adultier adult than I am, what are we removing from it? Or what are we hiring a contractor for? What are we doing? Because The other alternative is something that we don't budget for, overtime. If you're saying, if Mr. or Mrs. Manager, you say we need to have overtime, then I will go to my team, my other team, and we will figure it out. But again, we're in the driver's seat, so we can make those choices. So my pushback is, if you are working until 8, 9 o'clock the day before a holiday, whose fault is it exactly?
Yeah, I agree with you 110%. You're not going to get an argument from me, even though you're baiting me on one.
Okay, I'll check that off the list then.
But I do agree. But it is important to. You're right. It is a choice, and whether it is a last minute choice due to poor planning, or saying no, I'm leaving at 5 o'clock today because I have to. You don't have to do anything. I'm leaving at 5 o'clock today. My day ends at 5. Yep. I'm sorry. Is, I firmly believe it's a choice. So I wanted to go back to your high school reunion story for a second, because it got me thinking about my boring life. So thanks for that.
Wait. Did I live a boring life and it's a great thing?
It's the first one. I enjoy my boring life, but it got me thinking this is a rabbit hole we're not going to go down very far, and I promise. But it's the social media effect. It is when you go to a high school reunion, and I've been to a few before, Facebook took over or LinkedIn took over. And, because I think there's both sides of the coin, right? You have your LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram for your personal, and you have, LinkedIn is for your professional, and everything else is where you tell everybody where you went on vacation and, what you had for dinner and, the accomplishments of your family and friends and all that stuff, right? LinkedIn, we do the same thing on the professional side.
Right.
I have never seen anybody post, and I will say, and I'm an avid poster on LinkedIn for various reasons. Looking at the professional side, I have never put on LinkedIn, I spent 6.5 hours going over a spreadsheet today. So all I'm putting out there on my work social media is I went to Assembly of Delegates for the National Apartment Association a few weeks ago, and I got to meet with so-and-so, and I was in this meeting, and it was so exciting, but what I didn't tell anybody on that post was I was between every meeting, and you know this quite well, and many of our industry do this, I have my phone strapped to my ear, and I'm dealing with emergency after emergency after emergency. Yeah. And I will apologize. There was one person, I'm not going to shout her out. There was one person who was trying to talk to me the entire time. And she said, every time I tried to talk to you, you were on the phone. So there is a balance even to that.
Yes.
Right? I was at a industry-wide event. I had one job when I was there, and that was to represent my region, my organization in meetings. And I spent every other moment doing my job.
Right.
Because I wasn't doing my job. And I think it's the social media effect.
Yeah. How often do you and I have the conversation of, you know what, if it wasn't for my regular job, I could get done all of the other things that I want. And at the same time, you and I know for a fact, we organize our regular job to create those cracks, those minutes, like this conversation that we're having right now today. We're recording this in advance of when it needs to go out. And that is a conscious choice because we have made time today to do the thing in preparation for when the need is later. And I honestly believe that goes to a missing piece in our industry, in our set. I mean, about a month and a half ago, I did a conference. I spoke at the Florida Apartment Association conference, and the topic I did was on time management. And I wove in the importance of preventive maintenance into it. And the biggest audience response, I mean, room full of people that I'm up on stage making an absolute fool of myself, which
as usual,
not that hard. Yeah. As usual. And I'm talking about stuff and I'm getting good feedback and we're having a great dialogue and it's a wonderful session. But by far, it stopped this short of being a standing ovation I got when I threw in the middle of scheduling preventive maintenance that the maintenance supervisor was scheduled to take a vacation during this time period. And I stopped, I muted the screen, and I said, and maintenance supervisors, take your vacation. The room erupted in applause and shouting. And I'm up on stage going, I meant that to be kind of a throwaway line, and yet,
yes,
of course, internally I'm thinking, you know what? That might be a good session for me to do at a conference later.
If nothing else, for the applause that you would get.
For the applause, yeah, because that's what I'm here for. But it really hit home the fact that if that is such a enthusiastic response to a one-liner, we, industry, are missing something. If there needs to be that, what to me is an obvious thing, you plan your vacation, you take your vacation, and yet if it gets that much of a response, it's not just me that's hitting a one-liner. These are people who are identifying and noticing a trend that their maintenance supervisors are not taking vacation for whatever reason.
Yep. I have we said that we're recording this the day before Thanksgiving. I have two of my regional managers who are off today. Okay, this is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. They said, Chris, we're going to take off the day before and we're going to take off the day after. So and I said, great. And I supported it. One of them jumped on a 9 o'clock call, and one of them has been sending emails to me all morning. And I had a text, and others within the organization. I had to text him. I said, you're on vacation. Stop working. So I think as leaders, not only do we have to plan and make sure that our team members at all levels are taking their God-given right, their, federally mandated, state mandated, company mandated vacation days. It's extremely important, whether it is a week, whether it's a long weekend, whether you're doing something or you're not. Sometimes I just take a vacation day for me. I'll drive down to the beach. I will sit on the beach and read a book, turn off my phone, and just do that. And I think that a lot of people think vacation has to be a full week. It does not. A lot of people think that a vacation has to cost money. It does not. That you have to go somewhere. You don't. You can go to the beach. You can go to a park. You could go to a library, a museum, a play. I mean, there's thousands of things that you can do for yourself, and they don't have to cost any money. We're going to talk a little bit about travel in a second, but I want to tell a story about the little black box that is glued to my face pretty much, I want to say, close to 18 hours a day because I don't sleep that much. So when I'm in work mode, this thing is glued, I'm either like this or like this. There's no in between, right? But only when I'm in work mode. I had let's say, awakening several years ago. My wife and daughter and I, this had to be probably about 8 or 9 years ago. So my daughter was, I want to say, probably 8 or 9, and we were on a family vacation, and we went to Disney World, and we were waiting in lots of lines, as you do at an amusement park. And I made a decision before that vacation that I wasn't going to work, meaning I was not going to be on my little device. It was a conversation my wife and I had. It wasn't her telling me not to be on the phone. It was, hey, I'm not going to work. I didn't bring my computer with me. I put out of offices up. I turned the sync off, which is also a really good tip. Turn the sync. If you have your work email or work calendar on your phone, turn off the sync when you're disconnected.
Did it go something like this to where you're...
Yeah. Yes, it did.
Is that button actually going to work?
My finger was shaking to turn off the sync, but I found myself turning off the sync function on my phone. So I have to consciously sync my email to view what's happened since I last looked at it, right? I think I'm making a conscious decision. And again, my daughter didn't know any of this on this 8-9-year-old girl. And she looked at me and she looks at my wife and she goes, this is the best vacation ever. And hey, we're in Disney World, right?
Yeah.
That's what you want to hear from a kid.
Yes.
And then she said, because daddy's not on his phone working. Let's let that hang there for a second, because I think there's a lot of people.
I have a box cutter here somewhere, because
yeah. So it was literally from the mouths of babes. that my daughter, in her innocence, had already made the connection at a very young age that daddy always worked, that daddy was always on the phone. Now, some of you are listening to this and you're like, well, you're online on Disney World. Like, what else are you going to do? Which I've been there. I have been on those long lines, and yeah, as we all have. And yes, I've had my device out and send a text message, read an email, and that changed my entire perspective, I think, from that point in my career, is that when I am with my family, right, I do everything within my power to disconnect. Fire, flood, blood, they know the deal. They know that I am not a 40-hour-a-week hourly employee. They understand, and they will look at me and say, are you here right now? Before they'll start talking to me. If they see me on my device, and it's a conversation that we have, and I've started to have it with others, like, are you here right now? And the answer, if it's yes, I put the device aside and we engage as a family. If it's no, they know it's not a knock on them. They know daddy has something important that he has to do right now. But it's also drawing me to go, do I need to be here right now?
Right.
And whether that's here for work or here for my family. My family understands when I have to work. Work doesn't care what, no offense, just in general, I'm making a broad generality.
Yes, a broad
work doesn't, I want to make sure, I love my organization. They're very supportive of me and all of our employees, especially when it comes to that. But just work in general doesn't care about your family. But your family's very cognizant of your work, especially when you bring it home. So yeah, that was a story that I wanted to share because it changed my entire perspective from that day.
Yeah.
And and I think that a lot of people don't have that awakening, and that's why I wanted to share it. They don't necessarily have it.
Right. And I also think that there might be something to say about different stages in life too. Because again, broad generalities, thank you for that setting. Yeah. Broad generalities, when you are single, young, and trying to develop your career, it is worth focusing on the thing. And that focusing on the thing, if we're going back to that balance analogy, then if your goal or you've made the choice to have a successful career in whatever your career is, then at that time you have made choices to where work or your occupation can take up a large quantity of the time, and then you just go home and sleep. It's like, you read stories of what it takes to become a medical doctor now, of how many years you spend in residency and how much you have to do, which I want them to, yet there is zero balance. You're working. You don't walk around a hospital having doctors complaining about their work-life balance. Yeah, no,
there are some industries. My father was a police officer. There are just some industries, service industries, things like that, the work is the work. And you slip in life when you can. And I understand that absolutely. And I think that, to your point, yes, early in my career, 70-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks, because I was building skills, I was building connections, I was making money, building my personal wealth, building my personal skills, personal connections. But when you continue to do that in perpetuity, you start to burn out. You miss moments in life. And even if you are a single person who, loves your job, and you still need to take that time for yourself. What, family or no family? You need to for mental health reasons, for taking a moment, taking a breath. I have some of the best moments of clarity when I'm on vacation about work. I'm not thinking about work, but I'll have a moment of I've decompressed from it.
I read this book and I'm trying to think. Oh, it was Focus, Losing Focus.
Yes.
A book, and I'll think of the author here soon. But he talked about in the book, it was fascinating, that we're losing the ability to daydream because we spend so much time. If we're not doing something immediately, we have this that we're scrolling through and doing. When was the last time, and audience, I'm asking this kind of as a challenge. When was the last time you put down the phone and looked out the window? And not just for 30 seconds while you waited for the bus or the airport transport to donate. No, actually sat and stared at a wall. Let your thoughts wander. Let them go and do.
I'll do you one better, Paul. One of the things that I do, that listeners, we all experience it no matter where we are in the country, is a sunrise or a sunset. When was the last time you sat in your backyard, drove to a mountaintop, drove to an overlook, drove to a beach, and just watched a sunrise? Hey, they don't last that long. No. They look great in pictures. They look like they last for hours in pictures. They last all of 8 minutes.
Yeah.
From the moment the sun either breaches the horizon or starts to, breaches the horizon either way. With you're watching a sunset or you're watching a sunrise. It takes approximately 8 minutes. Just go and watch a sunrise or a sunset. And you can do that anywhere except for my friends in Northern Alaska. Yes, I have friends in Northern Alaska. I know there's a lot of time between those sunrises and sunsets.
Yeah.
Usually 20 hours between a sunrise and a sunset. Sometimes you can watch them the same day.
That really reinforces something I discovered accidentally when traveling. My goal, when I'm on the road, my goal every day when I'm working, and when you're traveling, it's sun up to sundown because you're in a hotel, you're not at home. Yes, you call your family, you interact with them, maybe text message or whatever method you use. But really, you're in a work environment from sun up to sundown. And a good friend of mine introduced me to the joy of smoking a cigar. And I don't do it very often, but the important part actually wasn't smoking the cigar. You have to be aware of what it is you're doing with the cigar. But beyond that, you can't get involved with anything else because it'll burn you. You'll drop all of the thing. Because of that, attempt, that practice, that enjoyment, you have to sit outside. And I found out real quick that sitting outside of a hotel, it is the capstone of a day to where now I take my book, I take a tablet, and at the end of a day, I will take a water bottle, go sit on a bench, especially if nobody else is smoking in the smokers area, go sit on a bench and be outside. And frequently, I won't read the book. I've got it if I need to read something, but often it'll be just watching something or seeing what's going on around me. And it is, honestly, it's gotten to be, I consider it a successful day if I get to the point to where I can go sit outside, especially at that magic time just before sunset to after sunset. I mean, I recorded a Maintenance Minute episode of me sitting behind a hotel because I noticed there was a light going off on a building that was across the way. I think I was out in Denver, Colorado when I did it, and I went to sit outside and I saw that light going off, and my brain went to all of the places it just went.
Yeah.
And at no point in time did I think to myself, I really need to check my Instabook-a-linktogram. At no point in time. It was the coolest, and right now this instant is the coolest realization of that as a effect.
So for me, I travel, you used to travel, I know you still travel with your current organization. You used to travel, if I remember correctly, 32 or 36 weeks a year? 40 weeks out of 52 weeks a year. You were on the road delivering training for the National Apartment Association for 12 years, 13 years?
For NAA, it was 9.5, but 9.5. HD Supply was before that. So it was roughly 15, just over 15 years that I was on at least 32 weeks out of the year. Monday through Friday.
I would assume a lot of these lessons you obviously learned over time, taking that break, and probably earlier. I personally have started traveling quite a lot more in the last year than I have. I think each subsequent year over the last 5 years, especially since COVID, my travel has started to expand exponentially. I think I was looking at my reports from this year. And again, this is the end of November. I have been in a hotel for over 100 days in the 11 months of this year. And and that is not vacation. That is not family time. I have been in a hotel for work. So I have just started to come to some of these little epiphanies and these little tips and tricks that, we're discussing here now, because it's part of that. It does tie into our work-life balance. Travelers, and I'm sure that there are plenty of them, no matter if you're doing it once a month, once a quarter, for your role, you're traveling. And there's probably a lot of listeners and viewers that are travelers. What I've started to do myself is take those moments like you're talking about, right? That's how I'm finding the balance, the work-life balance when it's all work. Yeah. Work, it's, I'm there for work. Yes, I'm working 10 or 12-hour days because I don't have a wife and daughter to go home to. So I can put in a little extra time on whatever project. I can open up the laptop and the computer, the laptop computer, and work in the hotel room. I have started to, I think all travelers, hey, we always find a nice restaurant, right?
That's right.
I have still finding nice restaurants, but what I'm doing is I'm going for a walk in a park. I am going to a movie. I had one of my counterparts years ago said, oh yeah, I stay at this hotel all the time. And I said, this hotel in Pittsburgh is not in Pittsburgh. It's way out of the way. And he goes, the movie theater is right across the street. He goes, so I'll work a full day and actually walk to go, see a 6 p.m. or a 7 p.m. viewing of a movie. That blew me away. So I've gone to aquariums and museums. I'm walking through botanical gardens. Doesn't always have to be something you have to pay for either. I've gone to see theater shows, and every time I, have to go to another city, I go to Ticketmaster and say, what comedy show or rock show is in town? And I've started to do that. And what it does is it takes me out of that work moment, and I have a moment for myself. Now, it really upsets my wife that I do all of these fun things when I'm out of town, but it also gives me a huge level of sanity.
Yes.
That I am not working 24 hours a day for 5 straight days when I'm out of town for a week. It gives me the opportunity. When I was in Atlanta, I slipped away. I had 4 hours between the end of our meetings and, dinner that evening, which was, an AA sponsored event. I had 4 hours. I took an Uber, went to the Georgia Aquarium by myself, walked around the aquarium for 2 hours, enjoyed it, took pictures, ate lunch. And, I took that. I could have sat in the hotel and I could have worked for 2 hours, but I made a conscious choice. And I think there's something that a lot of people need to do more, whether they are travelers like us, or they're just sitting at their, in their own small town, large city, whatever they're doing, is to just get out there. There's plenty to do to help maintain a sanity check on your work-life balance.
I think as I'm listening to you tell that story and agreeing completely, my brain is pointing out that, you and I have a different idea of what that is. And I think that what saying it out loud is like an obvious thing. Duh, there's Chris, there's Paul, we're different people, we like different things and stuff. But at the same time, we do need to highlight, there's no should about it. We need to highlight the fact that what is balance for Chris Caramanica is not balance for Paul Rhodes.
Yes.
And to your point, being on the road, I intentionally don't do things because I want to experience them or create an opportunity to experience them with my wife somewhere, somehow. I mean, traveling for work is not all glamorous. Of all of those years, I'm sure you get it too. You meet people, go to a property, you go to a situation and they say, you must have seen everything. No, I go to the hotel room. I look out the window. I honestly don't care what view I get. I don't need to pay for the extra view. I go, and the only time I look out the window is when I'm closing the curtain, and they stay closed. Even if last week I was out in Las Vegas doing property tours and different things. And they said, do you want to look at the strip or do you want to look at the mountains? And I said, I don't care.
I don't care.
And the young lady who was behind me goes, you don't? And I turned and looked at her. I said, which do you want to look at? And she goes, the mountains. I said, then give me the strip. That way she has the opportunity at the mountains room, because I don't care. Yeah. But that's not to say it's not important. That's to say that and I think I'm going back intentionally, my choices are just that. I'm intentionally deciding what I'm creating or identifying as balance. I mean, your big lesson, just an example of the differences, your big lesson in work-life balance was that going to a movie thing. My big lesson in work-life balance actually happened when COVID occurred, when all of a sudden you have to throw the anchor out, and I am no longer working and being required to make those choices on the road. I suddenly have to be home. And wait a second, I don't have a home office. My office is at that time whatever hotel room I'm in. I don't even have a desk. I set up whenever for the day I'm home in between those trips, I set up on the kitchen table and spread out and do the expense report and do all of the things. And that was okay for one day or the 2 days that I was home. COVID happened and we're home all the time. And that's when we're finding out the whole Zoom thing and where is that mute button and anti-mute button that somehow got put on and all of those things. But for me, I left my computer out. I got finished working for the end of the day and set my computer to sleep and then went about life. But the problem was the computer's still sitting out on the kitchen table. And every time I'd walk past, let me check this, because when I was in a hotel room, there was nothing else. Now I'm home and my family, rightfully so, during work hours of, 7 to 5 or whatever they were designated at that time. After 5 o'clock, my family, rightfully so, expected me to be there. And yet I'm going, my computer's open right over there. I can work on that presentation, or I got an idea for how I could talk about drywall again. Let me put that in. Can I adjust the PowerPoint? Maybe some notes? What about research? I wonder if I can hit that. And you sit down and you get sucked into the vortex of work. And there were times my wife, rightfully so, came in and said, when are you going to be finished working for today? Because it's 10 o'clock at night. My big realization was the fact
are you here right now?
Yeah. That is a great question. I need to write that down somewhere. Yeah.
Are you here right now?
Maybe I need to get it tattooed on my forehead backwards. So whenever I look in the mirror, in the camera.
I think that we're coming up on the end of our time. And, I started this episode like I start every other one. What is work-life balance? And I think that through our conversation today, work-life balance is what you make of it. It is a choice, whether that is what you're doing off the clock or how you're managing your day on the clock can affect your work-life balance. And it is an individual choice. It is not an organizational mandate. That is how I will always view it. Because if you have an organization, if you are at an organization that is constantly taking your time or making you work or has unrealistic expectations, you may be at the wrong organization for you. There might be nothing wrong with that organization, with that property, with that company. For anybody else, it may be a choice you need to look at and you need to make. So, Paul Rhodes, my dear friend, we said this would be a short discussion on work-life balance. Me and you have never done anything half-assed or short in our life, and this is another prime example of it. But thank you, my friend, for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance, powered by the Multifamily Media Network. Paul, any closing remarks as we watch the ticker clock go to almost an hour?
Really? An hour? I think the final remarks is that you and I are making an intentional decision about our time management to balance whatever else it is that we have to do today, of ending it right here. Thanks. Thank you again for the invitation. It's always a pleasure. And yes, we need to hit stop and then start back up and go for part 12, because you and I can do it. I know.
Do not tease another episode. I do not have it in me. Thank you all. I want to wish all of our listeners, both for my podcast, Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance, as well as all of the listeners that listen to all of the great podcasts, Paul's being one of them, on the Multifamily Media Network. I want to wish you all a very happy holiday, whatever you celebrate. I want to wish everybody a healthy and prosperous new year for 2025. It's been this podcast was not on my bucket list, was not on my bingo card for 2024. It has been an honor and privilege to come to you listeners every single week, and really looking forward to some of the things that we have in store, both as our network and for our shows, and even our small little niche of multifamily maintenance that Paul and I are a part of for 2025. So thank you. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast and all the podcasts on our network. And feel free to leave a comment or send me an email to beyondtheworktales@gmail.com. Thank you again, and see you next time.
Thank you for joining me for this episode. No matter how long you've been in our industry, or what position you have at your company or your community, everyone has a maintenance story to tell. Go to www.multifamilymedianetwork.com and leave me a voice message, or share your information and we can tell your tale together on a future episode. Please check out our sponsors and like, subscribe, and follow to this podcast or video, and join the Multifamily Media News Network newsletter for upcoming shows and blogs from me and the other great hosts on our network. Our stories all connect us. See you for the next chapter.